Hello and welcome to Professor Pincushion. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to create a two-piece bound buttonhole. You can see an example right here. So I'm going to show you how to create it. You can pretty much do it for any buttonhole that you have in your projects. Also, I'm going to show you what you need to do if you also have lining and facing that goes behind your buttonholes. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's go ahead and start with the prep work. Now, normally when you do a buttonhole, you sort of do it at the end of your project or the end of creating your garment. For doing a bound buttonhole, it's a little bit more planning and you're actually creating it towards the beginning. So after you cut out your pattern pieces, and if you need to apply interfacing to whatever place is going to have the buttonhole, go ahead and do that, but then you can go ahead and create your bound buttonhole. So we're just going to use my fabric here as an example. I already have fusible interfacing attached to the back. If your pattern doesn't ask for fusible interfacing, you can just skip that part, but we're just going to say mine asked for it. I clearly marked out where my buttonhole placement is going to be, and I even exaggerated the ends here, which is going to come in handy later. And I also copied this buttonhole onto the wrong side as well. It comes in handy to see it on both sides. So next we need to cut out our strips, and these strips are going to create this part on the inside. Now you don't have to use a contrasting color like me. You can use a matching color if you want. You're going to measure your buttonhole. My buttonhole is 1 inch, and with that you're going to add 1 more inch to create the length of your strip. So 1 inch plus 1 inch. So if you have a 2-inch buttonhole, then your strip will be 3 inches in length. This width here, this is going to either be, it depends on how wide you want to make the inside area here. So this is a wide one. This one here is a narrow one. If you want a wide one like mine, you're going to make it 1 inch. If you want the really small one, you're going to make this a 1/2 inch. So for my buttonhole, I'm doing 2 inches by 1 inch. If you want to do a small one, you can do 2 inches by a 1/2 inch. Really depends on the length of your buttonhole. I'm going to make sure that I have 2 of these strips, the same exact size, for each buttonhole that I'm creating. Now we're going to prep our strips. So you're going to place them so they're wrong side facing up. Then you're going to fold them in half lengthwise, so you're matching up the 2 long edges. You're going to press it, and then you're going to stitch right along the raw edge. For this stitch, I'm just doing a regular length stitch, and I'm just doing it pretty close to the edge, maybe about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge. I'm just trying to hold the raw edges together. I'm going to take one of my strips and I'm going to line it up so that the raw edge is meeting up with the center of this buttonhole line. So the folded edge is on the outside here, and I mark the center of my buttonhole to line up with the center of my strip so that everything is going to be even. Also, I'm placing these strips on the right side of my garment piece here. So this is the right side of my fabric, and then I'm going to pin my strip into place. My strip is now pinned into place. I take my fabric marker and I continue on the ends of the buttonhole into my strip. You can see here and here. So I'm just drawing lines so I can see where the end is on my actual strip. Now this line here, this is a line that's drawn in the center of my strip. So if I took the measurement from here to here and I divide it in half, that's going to give me my center line. And you just need to draw it between the 2 button ends. I'm going to stitch right on the center line here. I'm not doing the ends of the buttonhole, just the center line. Now for this one, I like to do a smaller stitch length. Normally I do, on my machine, it's like a 2.5. I do a 1.5 or smaller because you want to be as accurate as possible that you're actually hitting the end of the buttonhole and you're not going over that line. Don't forget to backstitch on both ends as well. I'm going to take my second strip and I'm going to line it up in the same way. We're going to do the exact same thing with this strip now. So now the raw edges are meeting in the middle and we have our folded sides here on the outside. So I'm going to mark it in a similar manner. I'm going to mark the edge of the buttonhole and then I'm going to draw a line in the center and stitch it just like I did this one. You really want to be accurate though and make sure that you're starting your stitches at the same end points. both strips are now sewn into place, and I just want to point out that they're not actually overlapping. Instead, they're just butting up the raw edges together. Next, we're going to start cutting our buttonhole open. So for this part, I'm just cutting my white fabric and interfacing underneath. I'm not cutting my strips at all. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut down the center, and you can do this with scissors, or if you have a buttonhole cutter, you can do it with that as well. So I'm going to cut down the middle of my buttonhole. I'm not cutting all the way from end to end though. Let me just flip this over so I can show you the back. So I've already cut into this a little bit. You can see it open there. When you have about 1/4 of an inch away from the end, you're going to grab your scissors, and again, I'm not cutting my strips at all. I'm trying to be careful, and I'm only cutting my fabric, my white fabric. And I'm going to do a slit down to my stitches. Do not actually cut to your stitches. You're just doing a diagonal cut here, and then I would do the same thing here on this side as well. So I'm just going to carefully put my scissors in there, do a little diagonal cut, and then I'm going to do the same thing on this side. So you end up sort of a Y-shaped cut on each end. Now for the magical part, you're going to take each of your strips and you're going to fold them under and fold them all into the wrong side. So I'm taking these edges, folding them under, and then it unfolds on the wrong side, and you end up with something like this. You may have to straighten up the back a little bit. So if I flip this over, I can straighten this a little bit more so it lies perfectly flat. We still need to do the ends of the buttonholes because there's no stitches there right now. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm looking at the right side. On each end, I'm going to lift up my fabric, and you're going to see something that looks like this. So I have the ends of my strips, and then I have this little triangle from when I cut out my buttonhole. You're going to take it to your machine, and you're going to sew across the base of that triangle. So you're sewing through the triangle and also through my little gray strips right here. And you want to make sure that your gray strips are butting up next to each other and they're not being pulled apart when you sew it. So I'm going to go ahead and do it on this side, and then I'll also do it on this side as well. Here's an example of one of my ends sewn. So I'm just stitching, you can see my black thread here, at the base of my triangle, going from one end to the other. Again, I am also sewing through my strips. I'm being careful not to sew over any of this fabric that I folded over. Also, you want to make sure that when you're stitching, you're sewing as straight as you can, because if you go a little bit off, maybe a little slanted, you'll definitely notice it on the right side of your buttonhole. So at this point, our buttonhole is done, and you can go ahead and move on to your next buttonhole if you have another one. After that is done, go ahead and finish working on your garment. Now, what I want to talk about next is what do you do if you have a lining or a facing that ends up covering the back of the buttonhole. For my example, I went ahead and basted another fabric underneath to pretend like it's my facing. So then if we open up my buttonhole, I actually have the fabric in there. So now my buttonhole is no longer usable. So I'm going to show you what to do in order to open up the facing in the back and also how to finish it. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to do a basting stitch around the buttonhole because we want to hold the facing or lining layer together with the buttonhole section. So everything is going to stay in place for this next part. For the basting stitch, I'm doing the largest stitch on my machine, and it's just a temporary stitch, so it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm doing it about a 1/2 inch around the whole buttonhole. You can even do this by hand if you want. Again, it's just to hold all the layers together. Take a couple of straight pins and place them at the end of each side of your buttonhole. Then you're going to flip it over. You want to make sure your pins go through all layers. Flip it over. You can see where the ends of my straight pins are, and you're going to draw a line in between the pins, a straight line indicating where your buttonhole is. Very carefully, I'm going to cut right on that line on my lining or facing fabric only. I'm not cutting anything that's on the right side of my garment. So I'm just going to cut from end to end, And then on each side, both on this side and on this side, I'm actually going to cut a little ways past my line, about 1/16 of an inch, just a little bit. Now I'm going to go around the whole buttonhole, and I'm going to use a straight pin to help me. I'm going to take this raw edge that I just cut, and I'm going to start folding it under so it's getting tucked between the facing and my little buttonhole strip right here. You can just see that peeking out. You want there to be about 1/8 of an inch. It's a very small amount, and you're going to go ahead, pin it into place, and I'm just going around the whole thing to do that. Once you have everything pinned down, we can go ahead and start hand sewing it into place. So we'll get a little bit closer to show you how to do that. All right, so I have my thread on my needle and it's knotted. So I'm going to start just on this one end here of the red, and I'm just grabbing a little bit of the red fabric, and I'm just going right on that fold. There's my knot. I'm just going to tuck my knot in there so we don't see that. All right, now I'm going to grab a little bit of the gray fabric, and I'm not actually going all the way through to the right side, just a little bit of the back side of this fold. And I'm just going to angle my needle so then when it comes up, I come up right on the edge of the red here. So it's kind of like a whip stitch. So now I'm back on this red, so I'm again going to grab a little bit of the gray. I'm going to angle my needle and just grab a little bit of the red again. And you want to make your stitches fairly small, and of course it'd be better to use a matching thread, but my stitches are so small they don't really show up that much. So I'm just going to do this all the way around my buttonhole. You can then remove your basting stitches and your bound buttonhole is done. So let's go ahead and test it out. There we got a working buttonhole. If we flip it over to the other side, you can see my facing and how it's been finished around the edge of the buttonhole. So that's all there is to it. Good luck in making your own. New tutorials are released weekly, so please subscribe to be notified of the next release. Make sure to check out our other videos and visit ProfessorPincushion.com to view our complete library with well over 200 sewing video tutorials, including our exclusive premium content. Our premium membership is only $5 a month for unlimited access and only available at ProfessorPincushion.com. Also, don't forget to download our mobile app for videos on the go. Thanks for watching.